All right. I got two stories. Got a ghost story and a good ghost story and a really good Bigfoot story. Kind of a short podcast. Hope you guys like it. All right, let's get it rolling. All right, here we go. In the early 1990s, my brother and I used to go to IHOP every night. We would spend hours there drinking coffee and discussing philosophy and art and religion and literature. We were sitting in the last booth in the corner where we could see out of both sides because each side had a row of windows. And the windows showed a scene of the Dallas LBJ freeway leading into I-35 and an endless stream of fast cars. And even though it was late at night, the stream was still moving. I noticed to my left, way out in the distance, a figure coming off of I-35. It walked down the middle of the median between the two sections of east and westbound traffic, and as it got closer, I could see it was a woman in a long white dress. She had long black hair and wore a white veil that flowed behind her like a train. Well, I blinked and rubbed my eyes, and I squinted to make sure I was seeing what I was seeing. And I watched as she got closer and closer, thinking that when she passed the bridge, I might be able to see her going down the other side. But while she was on the bridge, my view was obstructed by a service station, and I didn't see her come out the other side. She either disappeared on the bridge or crossed the freeway there amid the heavy stream of traffic and went down the grassy hillside. I read about a legend once called La Llorona. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that right. She is the weeping woman of the Southwest. It eerily fits the woman I saw. The legend says that the beautiful woman has long black hair and she wears a white gown, and she wanders through the night looking for children to take with her. Maybe that was just a meth head walking around doing that jerky kind of thing they do, and she had found a sheet to wrap her up with. I don't know. Let's go to the next. He's got another story here. Let's go to that. In the 1980s, I used to visit my sister and her husband and spend time with their kids every year. My brother-in-law's father lived with them. He was disabled and he stayed back in his room most of the time. My sister was a teacher and her husband ran his own company, and while they were at work and the kids were at school, I would be left alone with his father. Often my brother-in-law's clients would call the house and I would take a message for them. And when the phone rang, the father would pick up the phone and answer it too. And each time I told him that I had it covered, and then he would hang up. I never saw the guy much, and that was about the only contact I actually wanted with him. He was not a personable guy. My sister and her family moved to a new house with a pool, and his father died shortly after that. Well, I visited them at their new house, and one morning after everyone had gone to school and work, I was left alone again. And I was planning to swim in their new pool and read a book and watch TV, but as usual, the phone rang. It was a customer for my brother-in-law, and as I spoke to the customer, the phone made a clicking sound like another extension had picked up. "Hello," I heard the voice say, the same voice as my sister's late father-in-law. Well, I kept talking, and I took the message, and the caller hung up, and I didn't hear the extension hang up, so I stayed on the line. There was no dial tone, and it sounded like the line was still open, the way it used to sound on old ground lines with extensions. I listened for 20 seconds or so, and I felt rattled when I finally gathered up my courage. "Is anyone there?" I asked. The phone made a clicking sound of someone hanging up, and then came the dial tone. I was out the front door and down the block in a second, and I drank coffee at a local deli until it was time for my sister to come home. I am of the Christian faith, and I could tell you about some miracles I've seen. I do not draw major conclusions from these experiences, but I'm smart enough to know that I don't know everything, and some things just can't be explained. What a creepy, woo! That kind of gave me shivers. It's almost like those movies they make with the phone rings and the young 20-something women pick up the phone and it's like, "We know what you did. You know, those kind of creepy shows. I get bored with those, but when they first came out, they were pretty interesting. It kind of reminds me of that. And I saw a movie probably in the last couple of years on this La Llorona, the Weeping Woman of the Southwest. That was a horror movie. My wife and I love to go to movies. We're always looking at the ads at the movie theaters for what cool movies are coming out. We're always watching trailers and stuff like that. This is way off topic, but who has seen the new Kevin Costner movie out called Horizon? That movie has gotten terrible feedback from the public and from reviewers, but we went to see that movie and we loved it. I guess we're just of a generation who likes the big epic scenery and the long stretching story and the different characters and all that. But it was like a minute or two over 3 hours. And we both said driving home that movie, it felt like we were in there for 15 minutes. You just stay engaged and you're watching the story. I would recommend you all go see it, and just don't go with any expectations, but go see Horizon and understand that it's either going to be 2 or 4 movies. I don't know if he's going to do 4 now that this first one isn't making money. Actually, he's taken a financial beating on this movie. But I like Kevin Costner. He seems to be a pretty idealistic guy. He's got visions for his movies like Dances with Wolves and stuff like that. But go to this movie or rent it on a streaming service with the expectation that there's more coming. None of the loose ends are tied up in the first one, but it really sets the stage and gets you engrossed and involved in the story. I recommend it. I don't know why I guess talking about movies, horror movies, got me off on that. I'll quit talking about that now and we'll go to a Bigfoot. I got a Bigfoot story. Hang on. Okay, here's a Bigfoot story from New York. This is really good. I really enjoyed reading this. Here we go. I'm from northern New York State, about as far north as you can get without crossing over into Canada. I'm a paranormal investigator and cryptid researcher. My love for the subject came from my father, who would read me stories about Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, and UFOs and ghosts and the Dog Man, all of them. I live about 20 minutes from the foothills of the Adirondack Mountains and have collected numerous eyewitness encounters and sightings of Bigfoot here and surrounding areas. I spent a lot of time in the mountains, so it's no wonder that's where my first encounter took place. It was October of 1987, and I was 10 years old, and my father wanted a day just for the two of us to spend some quality time together, so we took a drive up to Cranberry Lake, New York, in the mountains. It was a beautiful day, and the colorful fall leaves were at their peak. My father drove about a mile off the main road to a picnic area right on the lake, and we sat down at the table near the water to eat a bologna sandwich and chips that we had packed with us, and we spent our time talking about different things. When the sun started to set, and it was nearing time to head home, my father walked me up the trail a ways to a small utility shed where I could relieve myself with a bit of privacy. As my father waited for me on the other side of the shed, I stood there staring into the quiet, wooded surroundings when, out of nowhere, something was thrown against the side of the shed. Well, that scared me half to death, and not long after that it happened again, and I finished my business as fast as I could, and I rushed to my father, but the concerned look on his face did little to comfort me. "Are you playing a joke on me, Dad?" I asked him. "No," he said bluntly. "Did you hear something hit the shed?" I asked. He nodded. "It was 2 rocks the size of my fist," he said. And then we heard grunts and growls. We couldn't see what was making the noise, even though the leaves had started to fall from the trees by this time of the season, and you could see a good 30 yards into the woods and up the hill from where we were standing. My father crouched down to one knee and he told me to get behind him, and he looked up through the trees and slowly pointed to something in the distance. It was so big, it didn't take long for me to see it, too. It was a 7-foot-tall dark figure with a huge upper body, and it was swaying back and forth between 2 trees. My father told me to turn around and start walking slowly down the trail back to the truck. And I did as I was told, looking back all the time to see if he was coming too. When I got to the truck, I finally saw him running down the trail at full speed. And we both jumped in the truck and got out of there as fast as we could. I was scared and confused, and tears were building up in my eyes, but I did my best not to cry. And we stopped at the rest area a few miles down the road, and my father put the truck in park, and he reached out to put his arm around me. "Are you okay?" he asked me. "Yeah," I said. "What was that?" My father is a believer, and he didn't hesitate. "I think we just saw a Bigfoot." "Well, I don't want to see him again," I said with the blatant honesty of a 10-year-old. My father kind of smiled. "Me neither," he said. After we got home, my father told my mother what had happened. I never really knew if she believed him or not. She was just glad that we were both safe. And I've only told 3 other people about this throughout my life. My father would talk to me about it from time to time, but didn't share it with many others. Knowing what I know now as a Bigfoot researcher and investigator, I'm certain we saw a Bigfoot that day. And every time I think about that experience, I'm taken back to that fall day in 1987 with my father, right back to being that scared little boy, right back to the fear I felt. And all these years later, I still can't shake it. Oh, man, that was awesome. That was a good story, an actual visual sighting, and the father was running. I wonder if the Bigfoot was chasing him, or, of course, I know some of the Bigfoot experts will say, well, hell, if he'd chased him, he'd have caught him. If he wanted to catch him, he'd have caught him. Bigfoots can do anything. But was he running from the Bigfoot? I don't know. That's the first thing I thought of when I read this. But this was a great story to the writer. This is old. I've had this for a long time. I finally got to it, and I'm glad I got to it because it's a good one. I appreciate you sending it, sir. Well, thanks for listening to this short podcast. I just want to get something up today. I'm writing Steve Lilly today. I am working on a couple of other things as well, but I want to keep this roll going of a steady podcast 2 or 3 times a week. So here's one right here. All right, y'all have a good rest of your week, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Thanks.